Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on Black Economic Empowerment, which was sponsored by the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I'm Ray Mahlaka, and I'm with the Daily Maverick, and joining us this afternoon is Moeletsi Mbeki, and if you follow the political economy closely, I don't think he needs any introduction. He writes and opines extensively on politics and the economy, and he is well known in discussions about public policy, and he doesn't hold back, and that's what we're hoping to have this afternoon. Now, we'll be talking about quite a polarizing topic of Black economic empowerment. Some people believe it has been a disaster, and others believe that it has been a success in attempting to reverse the legacy of apartheid. I wonder if there's any middle ground, and maybe we'll venture out in finding that middle ground with Moeletsi and all the participants that are joining us this afternoon. There are about 300 people on this webinar, so we really look forward, to your participation and views as well. Now, this webinar was inspired by an article that was written by the DAs, Helen Ziller, who wrote for the Daily Maverick earlier this month. And if you want to read the article, it should pop up on the comments tab, which should either be on the left or right. But we will pop it up for you if you want to read the article. But in the article, Helen argues that the ANC has legalized corruption, and that BE, which she says has been implemented by the ANC, has made corruption legal and morally acceptable. And Moeletsi has a lot of views about this. But perhaps the way we can just start off, Moeletsi, is that you agree with Helen that BE is the root of corruption and has departed from the initial aim of including Black people in the economy and for them to participate substantially in the economy. But you disagree with many people, including myself, who credit the ANC for conceptualizing BE and other empowerment policies that have followed. Tell us why you disagree, with the ANC being credited for conceptualizing BE.
Yes, I think it's very important to understand who conceptualized BE and for what end. Because as you say, there's a lot of opinions about Black economic empowerment. A great deal of the opinions don't understand where Black economic comes from, what its purpose was, who benefits from it, who does not benefit from it. So that is a fundamental issue. Black economic empowerment, Helen Ziller said it was conceptualized by the ANC. It was not. The ANC did not conceptualize BE for the simple reason that the ANC has been a multiracial organization since 1950, literally since 1950. So when you look at the main opposition to apartheid, which started in a big way after the Second World War, the main drivers of that opposition were the Natal Indian Congress, the Transvaal Indian Congress, and the African National Congress. And they formed a coalition together to mount what was called the Defiance Campaign in 1952. So first, the notion that Blacks were going to have preferential treatment would never, the alliance between the Indians and the Africans would never have been possible if the ANC was thinking of advantaging the Blacks against other races. So the Defiance Campaign, which is one of our critical turning points in the history of our country in the fight against apartheid, was led by two volunteers. One was Nelson Mandela, and the other was Yusuf Kachalia from the Indian Congresses. So you can see that from 1950 onwards, the ANC has been a multiracial coalition right up to the late 60s, when it opened up its membership to everybody so that anybody could become a member of the ANC and could stand for office in the policy-making organs of the ANC, like the National Executive Committee. So you saw people like Yusuf Dadu, the Indian, being in the National Executive Committee. You saw Joe Slovo, the white guy, being in the National Executive. So the ANC, as a multiracial organization, could not have conceptualized a position that favored one race group in South Africa.
That's very
so it never conceptualized.
Yeah, can I just chime in there? That's very interesting because, you know, following what she's saying is that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the principle and ideology of BE to include previously disadvantaged individuals in the economy and, you know, give them access to opportunities, that was never the case and intention. Is that what you're arguing?
No, what I'm arguing was that the ANC strategy was for freedom for all South Africans, and for all South Africans to have the same rights and to get rid of race policies, of racial discrimination in any shape or form. There is a famous comment by Mandela, for example, in the Rivonia trial, where he said he has been against black domination and he has been against white domination. So the ANC has always been very clear. So it is a mistake for those who think black economic empowerment was conceptualized by the ANC. They are wrong, which is why they don't understand what role black economic empowerment is playing in our society today.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on from the 1950s into the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The system required, you know, a collaboration with big business. You know, when there were visible signs that apartheid was about to end, big business moved very swiftly to collaborate with politicians, political parties, as well. Can you just talk us through the role of business in approaching, you know, prominent individuals in politics?
Okay, first you have to understand that the founder of racial discrimination in South Africa was big business. And this big business was a company called the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company introduced slavery in South Africa. The Dutch East India Company introduced genocide against the San people. It introduced the commando system against the Bantu-speaking people. So that is where big business derived from. So from the very beginning of modern South Africa, big business was central in the form of the Dutch East India Company. Now, if we fast forward to the 1980s, there was a very important turning point. Was a meeting led by the head of Anglo-American Corporation, a gentleman called Gavin Raleigh, who, in opposition to the apartheid president, I think it was P.W. Botha at the time, led a delegation to go and meet with the ANC in Zambia. And that's when a turning point in terms of businesses' participation in trying to undo the apartheid system. But in the process, of course, business had to look after its interests. And one of the topics on the list of discussion in Zambia between the ANC and the Gavin Raleigh delegation was the nationalization clauses of the Freedom Charter. Because obviously the nationalization clauses said they want to nationalize mines, banks, and monopoly industries. And of course, Anglo-American was a leading mine owner and was a leading bank owner. They owned First National Bank and a huge amount of mines. So that's where this issue, in a way, start off when we're talking about today now.
So okay, we've moved from the role of big business and the role that business has played. Who at that time did BE benefit? Who were the targeted beneficiaries that business was aiming and or targeting as well?
Yes, BEE was started, business, in fact, started the first Black economic empowerment company was a company called New Africa Investment Limited, NAIL, which was set up, I think, in 1993, if I'm not mistaken. Now, NAIL was set up by Sanlam, which was the second largest insurance company in South Africa at the time. And that is the first Black economic empowerment company. It was not set up by the ANC, it was set up by Sanlam. And Sanlam identified a need to protect its interests and the interests of big business generally by co-opting elements of the leadership or of the anti-apartheid struggle. And then it was soon joined by Anglo-American, who also started their own Black economic empowerment companies. But who did they recruit? They couldn't recruit you or me because we didn't have the power, the political power to influence or change economic policy. They recruited people who were the people who they thought were going to go to parliament, were going to be political leaders, and were going to become policymakers, and were therefore going not, or they were influencing them not to implement the nationalization clauses of the Freedom Charter. So those were the people who they targeted the benefits. If I can say just very briefly, Ray, the way in which a Black economic empowerment company was created, Sanlam had a subsidiary called Metropolitan Life.
Yes.
85% of the holders of life policies in Metropolitan Life, which was based in the Western Cape, were Black people. So what Metropolitan did was to take 10% of Metropolitan Life and select a number of Black anti-apartheid leaders to acquire that 10%. And it went to IDC, to Industrial Development Corporation, and on behalf of these Black leaders, borrowed money from IDC so they could buy shares in Metropolitan Life. So that's how it was structured.
Was there any specific individuals, names, who were the first, I don't know, experimental project of BE? Is there any beneficiaries in mind? The names.
Okay, the leader of the beneficiary group, and by the way, they did not start the company. It was started by Sanlam itself. Once Sanlam had put the whole structure in place, they chose a number of people, a number of Black leaders to be beneficiaries. The leader of that beneficiary group became Dr. Ndato Motlana. He's late now, but Ndato Motlana, if you remember your history, was chairman of the Soweto Committee of 10, which was one of the leading structures opposing the apartheid regime. He was, of course, also Mandela's doctor, and he had been in the ANC Youth League in the 1940s. So he was a stalwart of the ANC. And then the other person they brought in was Dr. Sam Mutswenyane, the founder of NAFCOC, the Black Chamber of Commerce, which was set up in the 60s. And then the vice president of the PAC, which was who became Justice Dihang Musanek, and there were a number of others. But essentially, one of the things you have to notice is that the people they chose to be beneficial were only Africans. That's why I'm saying, the Black economic empowerment, if the ANC had created it itself, it would never have excluded the Indians and the coloreds and the whites. Because the ANC, these were its partners. But because it was not created by the ANC, it only had African beneficiaries, and it excluded the Indians, it excluded the whites, and it excluded the colors.
Yeah. We are seeing your comments, Charles, Adams, Makosini, Ngosi, Beth Cook. We are seeing your comments, and we'll get to them once we just finish the historical part of this conversation. So that arrangement, Moeletsi, very quickly, did it, by definition, benefit broader society? In my views, BE should, the goal of BE should provide excellent education. It should, make a major improvement to living conditions. It should quicken the pace of economic growth, and it should encourage direct investment and create jobs. It should be very holistic in that approach. So by that definition that I just gave, a few seconds ago, did that arrangement meet any of those targets?
No, it was never intended to do any of those things. It was intended as a mechanism for influencing economic policy of the democratic government. That was the intention. But of course, things like education and so on, it's not the responsibility of private companies. It's the responsibility of the democratic government to educate the population.
Yeah. So let's move on now to post-1994. The ANC comes into power, and it starts to craft empowerment legislation such as BE, affirmative action, employment equity. These are pieces of legislations that are aimed at growing the participation. Well, aimed, I mean, in theory, that is. They aim at increasing the participation of Black people into the economy. So what happens then, Moeletsi? Did the ANC post-1994 depart from those goals of those legislations, empowerment and empowerment laws as well?
Okay, there's one step which we have missed. How did the Black economic empowerment, as designed by the private corporations, how did it jump to become policy for the state? That is a very important part to understand, because then you can see the continuity between the Black economic empowerment designed by the private sector to influence policy, and then it jumps from there into the new government. And how it jumped from there was through something called the Ramaphosa Commission. The Ramaphosa Commission was set up by NAFCOC and Black Management Forum and so on, because they realized that the white companies were now beneficiaries by having Black shareholders from government tenders. So they also wanted to be, so they asked Ramaphosa to chair a commission to investigate how Black businesses can benefit from Black economic empowerment as designed by the white corporations from the Black government. And that's what how what I call this virus jumped from the private sector into the public sector. It's a bit like COVID-19, how it jumped from the bat to the human being.
Yeah. So I see we in the comment section, a lot of people are saying, stop talking about the history, talk about the now. And
now, yeah, what do they want to know about the now? Who benefits from Black economic empowerment today? It is the people who were leaders of the ANC and the United Democratic Front in the 1990s, in the 1980s and the 1970s. They are the people who were the beneficiaries. They are the billionaires that you see today, the black billionaires. Those are that generation. It's the people who are now in the 60s and in their early 70s. They are the beneficiaries of black economic empowerment. You and me are not the beneficiaries, because you cannot be a beneficiary of black economic empowerment because you haven't got the political power to sell to the big corporations. And otherwise, you then go to the state and try and get preferential treatment from the state, which adds up into the corruption that we are seeing today. But who is now caught in this corruption is the younger people in their 30s and 40s. They are the ones who are caught up in the corruption that this virus, which was brought from the private sector, is doing. If you look at the people charged in VBS, for example, in the VBS corruption case, all of them are in their 30s and 40s. Because they are the ones who think they can make money in the same way that their older uncles make money out of black economic empowerment in the 1990s. They think there is that easy money to make, and so they resort to corruption. That's what is happening at the present moment.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Sikoa, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your surname, but he or she asks, how can BE benefited well-connected or relatives of the ruling party and left the poor out from benefiting to eradicate poverty? But I guess you just answered that question. I'm not sure if you want to expand.
Yes, Ray.
Yeah.
Yes, but this is a point which many South Africans find difficult to understand. And they keep asking me the same question. The point is that they benefited because they had political power and they could change the policies of the ANC government. And so the private sector was willing to give them money, literally shares in their companies, like in Metropolitan Life, for them to be able to influence government policy in favor of these companies.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for people to understand this, but that's how it works.
Yeah, yeah. And Terry Boysons asks, wondering how much triple BE has fueled corruption in South Africa. So in the public sector, BE is built in every procurement process. The state runs about 1 trillion rand, a budget in terms of procurement, from everything from stationery to water, bottled water. But BE is, at front and center of that. And we're now starting to see, especially now during the COVID-19 crisis, with corruption related to PPE, COVID-19 PPE goods and services, that BE is built in that system as well. But, obviously, in the private sector, it's different as well. But answering Terry's question about, how much BE has fueled corruption in South Africa, Moeletsi.
All preferential policies, inherent in them is corruption, because policies that prefer one person against another person means that one person has more influence than another one, and therefore, how do you get that influence so that you benefit more than them? How does Moeletsi benefit more than Ray in a tender by the Gauteng government, let's say? So then we use influence, we pull strings, we use our relatives, we do all sorts of things in order to get preferential treatment. So there is an inherent built-in corruption in the public sector, but it comes from the private sector. So what has happened is that it has totally neutralized the ability of the South African government to transform the economy of South Africa. People who should be working on how to transform and grow our economy are chasing government tenders and are looking for preferential treatment in private sector companies and so on and so forth.
So what's the alternative then? What do we do? Do we scrap, targeted race-based policies? such as BE. Are you a believer in their place right now in South Africa?
Yeah, no. If you elected me as president of South Africa tomorrow, the day after there will be no BEE, because I will scrap all the legislation that says BEE. What South Africa needs, and this is very crucial, our most important problem in this country is the poverty of our population. It's not the fast 4x4s for the black middle class, and the officials of the ANC in government. So that our biggest challenge today is we have to address the poverty. How do you address poverty in a capitalist society? You address poverty by promoting entrepreneurship so that you grow, the entrepreneurs grow the economy. So what we should do in South Africa is we should promote our entrepreneurs irrespective of their color, whether they are black, white, Indian, colored, whatever. We should promote our entrepreneurs. That's what will grow our economy. One of the things, by the way, which many people miss, BE has been with us and legislated since 2003. But if you start looking at what has been happening to unemployment in South Africa, unemployment in South Africa has been growing since 2008, which shows that BE is not a solution to our economic problems. So what we need is to grow entrepreneurs in South Africa. The African and the colored population were excluded from entrepreneurship during the apartheid period. We now have to find a formula for all South Africans who want to be entrepreneurs, to be encouraged to be entrepreneurs, and to be facilitated to be entrepreneurs. That's what is going to solve poverty for South Africa.
Yeah, I disagree with you fundamentally, Moeletsi, on that, because I believe that there is still a place for race-based policies, and here's why. In any economy, the first prize would be to have an entrepreneurship-driven and entrepreneurship-led economy. But in South Africa, we are not pro-entrepreneurship. There are so many structural barriers for entrepreneurs to start their own businesses. It's not an enabling environment for entrepreneurship to thrive in South Africa. So my problem with your approach is that, if you say let's have integrated business development policies, it assumes that everyone has an equal shot and is on an equal footing when it comes to access of opportunity, regardless of race, privilege, and economic mobility. I'd argue, and bear with me please, that your approach is very blanket, as it would assume that, for example, Sipho, who lives in a township and was probably the first person in his family to have a university qualification, has an equal opportunity and chance as well, like a Sipho or John, who is from Sandton and who grew up in an affluent, entrepreneurship driven family. So my view is that, isn't it dangerous to say that all targeted race-based policies should be scrapped entirely? Shouldn't we make a clear distinction between policy and policy implementation failures as well there?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that whether you are in the township or in the rural population or you live in Sandton, if you want to be an entrepreneur, our government, the state of South Africa, should provide you with the wherewithal to become, with an equal opportunity, if you want me to use that terminology, with the wherewithal to become an entrepreneur. Whether you want to make fat cooks, or you want to set up a clothing company, or you want to set up an artificial intelligence software business, you should be provided with the wherewithal to be able, as an entrepreneur, but you have to prove that your business has the capacity to succeed. You see, that is, so I'm not saying treat everybody. You have to treat all South Africans who have good ideas that can create new businesses and that can create jobs, whether they are black or white. You have to give them that opportunity.
Yeah, but when the state is, paralyzed and has, inertia over, policy implementation that supports, the development of small businesses, where do we even begin with that? I mean, yeah.
But that's precisely the question. What is paralyzing the state? What is paralyzing the government from doing this is because they are diverting resources towards their own consumption. If you look at Tito Mboweni revealed the other day that there are 29,000 civil servants and politicians who earn more than R1 million each. Now, if you are going to divert our resources towards this high living public sector employees, then we will not have the money to finance our entrepreneurs. So that is why. So these high living public sector politicians and civil servants, they are the ones who then pass the regulations which create an obstacles to entrepreneurship, because they see entrepreneurs as a threat, and that is what. If you look at Zimbabwe, if I can digress with your permission, Ray, I lived in Zimbabwe for 10 years. What brought down Zimbabwe was not because Mugabe was against white farmers. What brought down Zimbabwe was because ZANU-PF was against the emergence of black entrepreneurs. One of the most important black entrepreneurs in Africa today is a Zimbabwean. His name is Strive Masiyiwa, and he set up one of the first cellular phone companies. So when you look at the cellular phone industries in sub-Saharan Africa, you have MTN and Vodacom, you have Econet, and you have Celtel, which was set up by a Sudanese. Those are the 4 top entrepreneurs. Strive Masiyiwa cannot go home. He lived in exile in South Africa and in England because the regime in Zimbabwe is totally opposed to independent, thriving entrepreneurs who think for themselves. They want people who are dependent on them. That's why they put obstacles in the way of the development of entrepreneurs, especially black entrepreneurs. But all entrepreneurs, they put obstacles in their way. So Zimbabwe is a good lesson for us.
Yeah, my concern is that, and yes, there have been failures when it comes to BE over the past, 17 years, as you've elaborated. Since BE has been enacted into law, unemployment, we've regressed, substantially. Inequality we've regressed as well on that score. But the reality is, the face of poverty, inequality, and unemployment in South Africa is black. So for me, is there a way for South Africa to still be targeted in its approach to, target, racial groups that are still, at the, facing unemployment and, inequality as well, specifically that is, Moeletsi?
Ray, you've got it wrong.
Okay.
The face of you've got it wrong. The face of poverty in South Africa is black, colored, and Indian predominantly, but the whites are beginning to join that. The face of opulence in South Africa is white, but especially the new black opulent classes who have joined the white opulent classes. So it's totally wrong to think that because there are lots of black poor, there has been no black upper class and black middle class which has thrived. We have a huge black middle class that has developed in the last 26 years. And it's there. And as I point out, Tito even gave us a number of how many of them are paid by the government. There are others who are in the private sector, so it's not correct what you're saying.
Okay. I think we're going to have to disagree, Moeletsi.
Okay, cool.
We're going to just have to disagree on that.
Now that we can have wine, I think you and me can meet over a glass of wine.
Okay, well, we're going to, talk more about this. But Louise Carvin says, didn't the ANC-led government and business actually aim to build a middle class rather than to make it broad-based and address poverty? So, yeah, that's what Louise says.
Yeah, absolutely. The business, in fact, if you look at the big corporations, they started soon after the Soweto student uprising.
Yeah,
they realized that the black young people are becoming anti-capitalist, if you wish. They are dovetailing apartheid and capitalism. So they set up the two top business people in South Africa, Anton Rupert and Harry Oppenheimer, set up the Urban Foundation. And the purpose of the Urban Foundation was to build a black middle class, which would be more sympathetic to the capitalist system. And they have been doing that ever since. So yes, they have. The ANC itself has been doing that also through the public sector, building up this black middle class. But the problem is that the black middle class has been at the expense of the productive economy of South Africa, because it is transferring resources to consumption side of the economy rather than to the production and the investment side of the economy. So we have this bizarre situation where I will agree with you, whereby we're having a top end of our society growing with the growth of the black middle class, and the bottom end also growing, and the poor are becoming bigger and bigger, losing their jobs due to the policies of building the middle class.
Yeah, I think we can agree with that. I mean, and COVID has been a case in point to show these two different worlds.
Absolutely.
Let's balance this conversation. Is there any successes you think around our approach to empowerment in South Africa?
No.
No.
Not black economic empowerment. We have made lots of successes in South Africa since the end of apartheid, but not because of black economic empowerment, because we've had entrepreneurs like Phuthuma Nhleko who built MTN and so on and so forth. But that's not because of black economic empowerment. It's because of entrepreneurs who are applying themselves, building up their businesses and so on. And we have several, quite a few of those.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest multinationals in Africa today is MTN, which was built up by black entrepreneurs, and today it's all over Africa. It's one of the largest companies, but that's not BEE. It's those entrepreneurs who build the company.
Yeah. Can I try to convince you?
To do what? To support black economic empowerment?
Yes, and there are a bit of successes that I've managed to dig up, Moeletsi.
Okay, so we'll have a drink on this, but you'll have to buy me a single malt whiskey if you want to convince. The wine won't be enough.
But very quickly, so I come from, I'm a financial and business journalist. That's my background. So I report a lot on BEE and many of the transactions around BEE. I would argue that there are several successes, Moeletsi. I mean, first of all, say what you want about affirmative action, but it has given Black people an entry point in a very restrictive labor market. It is today reprehensible to have a company management and boards that don't reflect, the demographics of the country. So on my end, I think, affirmative action has benefited a lot of people, including those, that middle class you talked about earlier on, even though there's large discrepancies between the middle class and the working class. That's just one of it. A lot of companies that, have, philanthropy-based, BE investment schemes that benefits communities, women empowerment initiatives as well. For me, I regard that, as one of the successes of BE. You talk about MTN, for example. They launched a BE share scheme, which is, over the past 10 years, I think. That was a relatively successful scheme. It did create value for many of the Black shareholders. So I mean, those are just the few ones that I can come up with. But to say that there's absolutely no benefit, that can be derived out of BE, I have to disagree with you on that.
Okay, but now you're talking about affirmative action. Affirmative action is not the same thing as BE.
Yeah.
Let me just say what has been happening in South Africa is that our companies, the South African, let's look at the private sector.
Yeah.
The South African private sector has been, the top management has been white because of the apartheid policies. The middle management has been white, but the white population is not growing in South Africa. So the consequence is that you have had the private sector has had to recruit Black people into positions of management, especially of middle management. It's not because of affirmative action. It's because they have to. If their companies are to operate, they need Black middle managers to make their companies run. They can't. There are no whites to do it. So you have to distinguish with economic imperatives and affirmative action. The affirmative action that we have had is in promotion within the public sector. Now, this is a very mixed picture of what affirmative action has achieved by promoting people in the public sector. But I think that's a topic for another day.
Well, in fact, I'm being trashed in the comments right now, Moeletsi. Kim says, Kim agrees with you. I lost Kim's comment. Oh, but here it is. Kim Webster says, your thinking, Ray, is redistributive and not growth orientated at all. Which is, I think, what you just said there. That's the last point you said. But Beth Cook says, is your view that Black economic empowerment should be focused on entrepreneurs and not on the upliftment of the poor? Is that what you're saying, Moeletsi?
No. When you develop entrepreneurs, you actually uplift the poor, because the entrepreneur to succeed has to create jobs for people to. That's how you make profit. You have to employ people to work for you, then you make profit as an entrepreneur. And then those people are uplifted, not by giving them social grants. Social grants do not uplift the poor. They keep them in poverty, which is the government's solution to poverty. My solution is we support entrepreneurs, and they help the poor to create jobs, and that's how we uplift the poor in this country, not by social grants.
Yeah. Kadzai Chatidza says, Ray, cite specific example of enterprises. Kadzai, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you can just send a comment before we go off in the next 15 minutes, I'll gladly engage on that. Moeletsi, there's a comment that I need you to address, but basically the comment, if memory serves, was that aren't you speaking from a position of privilege, given your name and your family and the role it has played, in public policy and shaping public policy? Aren't you coming from a position of privilege that you can now, write off, BE and all these policies?
Well, my family comes from a position of privilege going back to the 19th century.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with BEE. My great grandfather was a landowner on my mother's side in Matatiele, in Mount Fletcher, and they ran dairy projects. On my father's side, they were rich peasants and so on. So if you look at the Mbekis, then you have to go and read. There's an 800-page book about my brother's biography. So those who want to understand where we come from, they have to go and read that 800-page book. But there's a middle class in South Africa that grew up in the 19th century. Yeah. And I can't explain. And it is not just the Africans. It was there amongst the colors after the abolition of slavery. Yeah. It was there amongst the Indians after because the Indians who came to South Africa were not just the indentured laborers. There were others who came here as teachers, as lawyers, like Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi came to South Africa as a lawyer to represent Indian middle-class people who were being discriminated against. So we have an old middle class amongst the Black, African, and colored that goes back to the 19th century. That's where we come from. And if you don't understand that, you think we are privileged because my brother was president of South Africa. No.
Yeah, I think that's the reference point. Your brother being Thabo Mbeki and his role in the state and policy formation as well. I think that's what the position that this person came from. But someone says, Ray, you and your guest line of argument clearly shows your misunderstanding about B-BBEE. So basically, this person, Mohale Lahana, says we both don't understand what BE is all about, and we need to go read more, basically.
Yes, but you see, B-BBEE has got all sorts of layers. Yeah. That you have to meet and all those. But those are window dressing to hide what is really BE, what it is about.
So Milton Kekana says there's a lot of resistance from corporate and white folks to transform the economy and to also share on the wealth of this country. How do you suggest we transform the economic landscape? You did talk about that. Anything else to add, Moeletsi?
Well, there's a lot that needs to be done to transform the economy of South Africa. One of the things that the corporate sector is beginning to learn is that the South African economy has to be made productive. And you cannot make the economy productive without growing the economy and without employing more people and so on. So if you look at the private sector released a document about last month on an inclusive economy on South Africa. Now, this is a very good, positive document. For the first time, the private sector is pointing out themselves that we have to have an inclusive economy and that so the things like migrant labor that the private sector has been promoting, people living in shanty towns, in these hugely rich mining towns and so on, they now realize that this is not the way of the future. They may have done it in the past, but it's not the way of the future. So so I recommend this person who's sending the question, they must look at the new document that Business for South Africa has come up with, and they realize one of the ironic things is that business in South Africa, because they understand the dangers of this massive poor population for themselves and their assets, they realize that something more drastic has to be done to restructure the economy of South Africa.
Yeah. So I mean, let's look at the ANC, governing party and the state. There's no way in hell that they're going to scrap BE anytime soon. I don't think that discussion is going to go very well with your comrades, Moeletsi.
No, they won't. I agree.
They won't. But is there a way to salvage it? Is there a way to amend it in its implementation so that it can have a much broader impact, to society?
Okay, Ray, I think your question, can I change your question?
Sure.
I think what we should look at is that the ANC has been in power for the last 26 years. What has it done for the people of South Africa during the last 26 years? And that is more the critical question. It's not whether they keep or don't keep black economic empowerment. There are many other policies that the ANC government has. So we have to look holistically at what it has achieved. 26 years after the ANC was in government, the last figures on unemployment showed that we have 30% of our working age population unemployed. We have the highest unemployment in the world. We have the highest inequality in the world. 26 years after the ANC took power. Now, that's the question we have to ask. We can't narrow it to just BEE. Is why has this happened? Yeah. Why did this happen? And how do we get out of it?
And how do we get out of it? For now, I'm talking about the now. Is there specific things we can do?
But in the here and now, well, first, these hugely paid top civil servants. The South African civil service is the highest paid civil service in the world. 14% of our GDP goes to pay the public service. Countries like South Africa, only 6% of GDP goes to pay the public service. So that is what the ANC government has done. It has created this massively wealthy public service. Of course, the guy cleaning the street is not wealthy. But the upper echelon, the middle and the upper echelons of the public service are paid millions and millions. I was reading the other day that Zandile Gumede, by becoming a member of the KZN provincial legislature, she earns 1.1 million rands just by being a member, by being an MPL. So that's what is causing the problems of our economy. This enormously expensive public sector, which is taking resources which should go into building a productive economy and directing them to the consumption of this massive public sector, which actually a lot of what they consume are imports. They are consuming imports. If you look at what this hugely paid elite in South Africa, black or white, what do they consume? If you go to Woolworths, you find they're eating chicken coming from Brazil or from England or South America. Why? Because we are not investing in our own agriculture. So there are lots of things that have to be changed, but the ANC won't change them because as a party, it benefits from them.
Yeah. So Kudzai Chatiza, you came back to me and you say, I was on a path towards balancing a debate by citing good cases. And I guess maybe he or she wants cases. Well, I mean, one of them is that I think according to a research firm in Pardex, it says that in 1992, South Africa had about 15 black directors on JSE listed companies. By 2012, that number increased just over to 1,000. And the BEE Commission, which is an organization that tracks, compliance with BEE legislation. It says that Black South Africans holding directorships on JSE listed companies is now sitting at about 43% or 44% in 2019. So I think you cannot discount that progress. But I guess you're going to have to look at the underlying role of those directors and companies. Are they playing a meaningful role in informing or shaping a company strategy there? Moeletsi, do you want to challenge me? Do you want to add something to that?
No, I don't want to add anything. I mean, the directors, if I go back at the very beginning, with Metropolitan Life, it had suddenly overnight, it had black directors, but they were actually doing nothing. They knew nothing about life insurance. The old management that was running Metropolitan Life carried on managed, but then we could produce statistics that Metropolitan Life, a listed company, now has 5 new black directors, but actually they are window dressing.
Oh,
they are not real directors.
Wow, Moeletsi, we need part 2 of this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
There's a lot of questions about competency and meritocracy in your alternative that you proposed earlier on. You know, will it be a system in which is based on meritocracy, competence? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, if we are promoting entrepreneurs, an entrepreneur has to show that his or her idea has got legs, let me put it that way. Which means that there is no way of discriminating against a good idea if it is going to create a viable business that employs people. But it has to have merit, because that's what gives it legs. So it's a meritocracy. Yes, that is the point I'm making. But some of the directorships at the JSE, well, no, you have to take them with a pinch of salt.
Yeah. Can I end on a positive note, because we only have about 3 minutes to end this?
Well, Ray, you are the supporter of BE now. You tell us the positive note.
I'm going to take this opportunity, Moeletsi, and read what Tisetso Tloleng says. He or she says, if it wasn't for B-BBEE, some of us would not have been given the opportunity to do business with the private sector. They only allow us in so that they can tick box, okay? But that once I'm in, I think they get surprised by the quality of service that we give them. When it comes to corporate South Africa, black businesses are incompetent until proven otherwise, while white businesses are seen as competent until proven incompetent. So it's a balanced approach. You know, he's on the one hand, he or she says if it wasn't for BE, he or she would not have gotten a foot in the door. But once you know, he or she got in, it's a different experience in how they treat it. But any final points, any departure points, Moeletsi, that we can take?
Well, my departure point is that South Africa has a great future. We have survived as a country a huge amount of problems, from slavery, from slave trade, from migrant labor, from this establishment of the mining industry, the huge cost to the people of South Africa of the mining industry. But those who want reparation, they should go to the Dutch and the British and ask them to pay reparation for what they've done to South Africa. We have to build the country to move forward. So those who think that they should focus on reparation, they should go to the Dutch and the British and say, pay us for the harm you did over the last 350 years, and good luck to them. But we have to get on with building a new country.
It will be a Herculean task, first of all, Moeletsi Mbeki. He doesn't hold back, and I don't think we agree on certain points, but that's fine. That's the nature of debate. Thank you so much to everybody who've joined us. Again, thank you so much, Kunrad Adenauer Stiftung, for sponsoring this webinar. Moeletsi Mbeki, thank you so much, and to everyone who participated in this debate. Cheers, Moeletsi.
Thank you. Bye. Good day.